The Galactic Council had long prided itself on order, discipline, and an unshakable sense of superiority. For millennia, it had woven together the destinies of countless species, establishing rules, hierarchies, and fleets so vast that few dared to challenge them. Its authority was absolute, its reach unparalleled, and its military might legendary across the stars. Generations of leaders had instilled in every council member species the belief that no force could resist their power, no challenge could withstand their fleets. Victory was assumed before battles were even fought, and the galaxy, for the most part, agreed. Among all species under the Council's watchful gaze, humans were dismissed with casual amusement. Early encounters had convinced the galaxy that humanity was impulsive, chaotic, and fragile. Our colonies had grown slowly. Our ships were primitive compared to the fleets of ancient empires, and our tactics seemed erratic, more instinct than strategy. Council observers often recorded our successes as flukes, our resistance as lucky improvisation, and our ambition as a dangerous curiosity. To them, humans were a species of chaos that could be managed, contained, or ignored, but never feared. They did not anticipate the stubbornness of a species that refused to surrender, adaptively respond, and endure. The outer rim of human exploration had always been a thin, lightly defended region. Colonies spread across a handful of star systems, each tenuously connected by fragile communications and slipstream routes that could be disrupted easily. For the Council, this region was an ideal testing ground, a place to enforce control without risking significant losses. It was here that the first spark of Council arrogance ignited into a catastrophe. A minor rebellion in one such system, a small human colony on the planet Hestara IV, was reported. The colony refused to recognize the Council's appointed administrators, claiming that humans had a right to govern themselves without interference. The Council, confident in its dominance, dismissed the colony's protests as trivial. They did not consider that Hestara IV had been chosen deliberately, its position ideal for drawing attention without risk, and that the colony's defiance was a calculated provocation. In response, the Council assembled its greatest armada. 5,000 ships, the pinnacle of centuries of design and warcraft, were dispatched to enforce compliance. The fleet's composition reflected a perfect balance of firepower, speed, and strategy. Dreadnoughts bristled with energy cannons capable of vaporizing entire planetary shields. Carriers launched squadrons of fighters that could overwhelm any planetary defense. Frigates and cruisers formed impenetrable screens to protect the fleet's core. The admirals in command, experienced and confident, believed they had the perfect tool to discipline the chaotic humans once and for all. As the fleet moved, it carried with it the arrogance of millennia. Every ship's captain, every admiral, every strategist assumed they had already won. The Council's bureaucracies had spent generations analyzing human behavior, and they were certain of the outcome. Humans, they believed, were too impulsive to coordinate, too unpredictable to strategize, and too fragile to survive the calculated might of the Armada. Their reports, written with detached certainty, declared that human resistance would crumble under the first show of overwhelming force. They had not anticipated, could not comprehend, the truth. Humans were far more than they appeared to be. Unknown to the Council, humans had anticipated their arrival for decades. Hestara IV was not merely a rebellious colony, it was a lure, a deliberate bait designed to draw the Council's Armada into a trap. Beyond the planet, in sectors unmapped and deemed untraversable by Council standards, the real human fleet lay in waiting. These were vessels, forged over decades in secret, built not just for survival but for precision and domination. Hulls were layered with adaptive alloys. Energy shields could bend particle streams unpredictably, and weapons systems were integrated with intelligence that allowed them to anticipate enemy movements before orders could even be given. Human minds, honed through generations of survival in hostile, uncharted space, coordinated with these ships as though they were extensions of the fleet itself. Human crews had trained for this day for centuries. Every scenario had been simulated, every tactic rehearsed against every possible Council strategy. What the Council saw as chaos, humans saw as opportunity. Every flaw in Council doctrine, every predictable assumption had been catalogued, studied, and prepared for. Their arrogance was a weapon, their certainty a vulnerability. Humanity's fleet, hidden in the void, was ready to exploit it with surgical precision. Meanwhile, Council officers discussed the impending operation with a mixture of anticipation and hubris. Admirals spoke of teaching humans their place, of demonstrating the futility of rebellion, of showing that defiance would meet instant and overwhelming force. No one paused to consider that humans might have evolved far beyond the limitations assumed by outdated data, that a species dismissed as chaotic could be coordinated, adaptable, and ruthlessly efficient. The very arrogance that had guided the Council's decisions had blinded them to the truth. Underestimating humans had always been dangerous, and now the price of that misjudgment was about to be paid in full. As the fleet approached Hestara, IV scanning for resistance and preparing for bombardment, the first human ships silently slipped into position beyond sensor range. Cloaked in advanced stealth fields, they waited for the exact moment. These were no ordinary vessels. They were war machines designed for rapid, decisive strikes, each integrated with neural networks that allowed for instantaneous coordination across light years. The humans were patient, disciplined, and deadly calm, a sharp contrast to the chaotic image painted by the Council's assumptions. The stage was set. 5,000 ships of the Council, confident in their superiority, were about to confront a human force that had anticipated every move, calculated every outcome, and prepared to shatter every assumption. The galaxy's most powerful armada believed it would enforce order, subdue a rebellious colony, and reaffirm human inferiority. What they did not know was that they were sailing into the culmination of millennia of preparation, a trap that would forever alter the balance of power in the stars. The Council's arrogance, as it always had blinded them. One wrong move, one overconfident step, and the humans waiting in the shadows would not merely resist, they would destroy, dismantle, and redefine what it meant to be underestimated in a universe that had forgotten how dangerous humanity could truly be. As the Council's massive armada approached Hestara, the humans remained unseen. Their ships perfectly aligned in hidden sectors the Council had long considered impassable. These regions, blank on every star chart and dismissed as empty, were in truth corridors of precision-engineered ambushes. Human vessels moved silently through gravitational folds and quantum shadows, cloaked from even the most sophisticated sensors. Each ship, from the smallest scout to the flagship Eclipse of Resolve, was linked to a neural network that allowed instantaneous coordination across thousands of kilometers and across the void itself. The Council's fleet, despite its size and sophistication, had no understanding of what awaited them. When the first Council ships crossed the outer perimeter of Hestara's orbit, human forces struck. It began subtly, a distortion in space, a flicker of sensors, an anomaly too brief to analyze. By the time the council captains realized something was amiss, entire squadrons had been shredded before launch. Carrier decks erupted in uncontrolled energy discharges, obliterating fighter wings mid-flight. Dreadnoughts found their propulsion systems failing, gravimetric fields twisting unnaturally and pulling hulls into impossible angles. Frigates, attempting evasive maneuvers, collided with debris from other ships, their formations dissolving in chaos. Human weapons were unlike anything the Council had catalogued. Gravimetric disruptors twisted space itself around targeted vessels, collapsing hulls from the inside. Energy weapons adapted instantly to shields, negating centuries of defensive advantage. Boarding drones infiltrated command hubs, overriding systems in milliseconds, turning entire ships against their own fleets. Every attack was calculated, every strike precise. There was no panic, no hesitation, only the clinical execution of decades of preparation. Admiral Celine Torin, overseeing the ambush from Eclipse of Resolve, coordinated the operation with unwavering focus. Her neural-linked interface allowed her to control entire flotillas as if they were extensions of her own will. Orders were transmitted instantaneously, countermeasures anticipated and neutralized before the Council even realized what had happened. Every Council maneuver, every counterattack, every attempt at regrouping was anticipated, preempted, and punished with merciless precision. The human fleet was not merely attacking, it was performing a demonstration in strategy, patience, and exploitation of arrogance. The Council's forces had always relied on size, speed, and overwhelming firepower. Humans turned those advantages into vulnerabilities, guiding the Armada into corridors of destruction where their numbers became a liability rather than strength. Massive ships, built to project terror, became instruments of their own destruction as humans exploited gravitational anomalies, energy fluxes, and battlefield geometry. As chaos spread, Council admirals struggled to maintain command. Messages between ships were intercepted and rerouted, causing confusion, delays, and misfires. Pilots who had trained their entire lives for war found themselves unable to predict human movements. The very tactics that had ensured victory across countless campaigns were now useless. The humans, small in number compared to the Council's 5,000 vessels, moved with such coordination and anticipation that it seemed the entire Armada was dancing to a rhythm dictated by their unseen hand. On Hestara, IV the colony watched from orbit, shielded by the humans' superior technology. Communications from their flagships relayed the unfolding events in real time, showing the Council's might crumbling piece by piece. For the first time, the inhabitants of the colony saw the truth behind the centuries of underestimation. Humanity was no longer merely a stubborn, chaotic species. They were a precision force, a predator in the void, and the architects of a lesson that the galaxy would never forget. By the time the sun rose over Hestara, IV the first wave of the Council's Armada had been shattered. Dreadnoughts drifted powerless, carriers were reduced to burning wrecks, and frigates floated as twisted shells of metal. The humans had demonstrated that one wrong move, one lapse in judgment born of arrogance could shatter the Council's invincible fleet. The stage was set for total annihilation. With the Council already destabilized, human forces prepared to press their advantage, but even in this overwhelming display, discipline reigned. Civilian worlds untouched by Council aggression remained safe. The humans' purpose was not wanton destruction, but the calculated, surgical dismantling of the galaxy's overconfidence. The lesson was clear. Underestimate humans at your own peril. for they had waited in the shadows, learned from history, and were now executing a plan whose scale and precision the galaxy could scarcely comprehend. By the time the Council realized the magnitude of the ambush, it was already too late. The human fleet moved with lethal coordination, exploiting every vulnerability that centuries of overconfidence had created. Ships that had been symbols of absolute power, the pride of the Council's armada, were dismantled one by one, their commanders unable to react before disaster struck. The first targets were the command vessels, human boarding drones, invisible to sensors and faster than any Council defense, infiltrated the central cores, overriding systems and seizing control of the ship's weaponry. Gravimetric distorters and adaptive energy cannons turned the Council's own firepower against them. Dreadnoughts designed to withstand full-scale bombardment were ripped apart as humans targeted their propulsion nodes and gravity stabilizers, leaving hulks drifting like broken monuments to hubris. Fighters and frigates attempted evasive maneuvers, but humans anticipated every tactic. Cloaked ships emerged from the shadows to cut off escape routes, while specialized strike teams disabled fleet coordination nodes. Carrier decks erupted in chaotic explosions as launch bays malfunctioned, leaving pilots trapped in their own hangars. Human drones struck with surgical precision, neutralizing shields and weapon systems before a single Council officer could issue a coherent counter-command. Admiral Celine Torin coordinated the offensive from Eclipse of Resolve, her neural-linked interface acting as the fleet's central brain. Every attack, every diversion, every feint was calculated to maximize disruption, while minimizing unnecessary destruction. Even in the midst of chaos, discipline and efficiency were absolute. The human fleet flowed like liquid steel, enveloping Council vessels in a web of inevitability. Within hours, formations that had taken decades to perfect collapsed completely. Ships collided in space, energy grids overloaded and exploded, and the once pristine armada became a drifting graveyard of debris. Council communications became frantic, broken, and chaotic. Signals were intercepted and falsified, sending false commands that further worsened the collapse. Officers trained for generations in strategy and battle coordination were left helpless, watching their fleets unravel under a foe they had dismissed as insignificant. Yet the humans were not indiscriminate in their destruction. Civilian installations and colonies, untouched by Council interference, were spared. Human forces demonstrated that their power was not mindless destruction. It was precise, purposeful, and calibrated. The message was unmistakable. Underestimate humanity, and the result is total annihilation. Respect humanity, and survival remains possible. By the end of the engagement, the Council's armada lay in ruins. 5,000 ships, the culmination of millennia of military engineering and tactical planning, had been shattered by a fleet that, by the galaxy's standards, should have been inconsequential. The Outer Rim systems, once overlooked and dismissed, now bore the scars of humanity's precision and strategy, a clear testament to the dangers of arrogance. Across the void, news of the ambush spread. Council systems trembled under the realization that the humans were no longer a species to be dismissed. Their capabilities, patience, and strategic genius had rewritten the rules of engagement. One wrong move, the decision to assume humanity was weak, had led to catastrophic defeat. History would record that day as the moment the galaxy learned the terrifying truth. Humans were adaptable, intelligent, and mercilessly precise when provoked, and no empire could presume invulnerability against them. With the Council's armada shattered, human forces did not linger to occupy or plunder. There was no desire for conquest or revenge beyond what had already been accomplished. Instead, the humans moved systematically, leaving behind a clear and unambiguous message: arrogance against humanity would never go unpunished. Orbital beacons were deployed around key systems and the remains of Council vessels. These devices broadcasted a simple yet profoundly chilling declaration across all frequencies, reaching every known civilization in the sector. You underestimated us. You miscalculated. Humanity endures, and the price of arrogance is annihilation. This message was more than a warning. It was a manifesto of intent. Every species that had ever considered humanity a minor irritant now understood that underestimation carried consequences beyond comprehension. Across the outer rim and into central systems, civilizations recalculated strategies, reassessed alliances, and revised centuries-old doctrines. The humans had not only defeated the Council's armada, they had demonstrated the power of patience, preparation, and precision. As the humans withdrew from the immediate conflict zone, they did so with absolute discipline. Civilian colonies untouched by Council aggression were left intact. Trade routes remained open where possible. The destruction had been selective, targeted, and educational. Humanity had made a choice to demonstrate capability without becoming indistinguishable from the aggressors they punished. Within Council ranks, panic and introspection spread simultaneously. Generals and politicians who had once regarded humans as trivial now found themselves questioning every assumption. Their doctrines, based on centuries of dominance, were obsolete in the face of human adaptability. Commanders compared battle simulations against the reality they had just witnessed and realized that nothing in their training had prepared them for an enemy that anticipated every move, exploited every flaw, and acted with perfect coordination under extreme stress. Admiral Celine Torren's final transmission to the fleet echoed across neural networks, reaching every human vessel engaged in the operation. The lesson is complete. The galaxy now knows the price of underestimation. We are humans, adaptable, precise, and relentless. Remember this, and let every action moving forward honor the discipline and planning that has brought us here. The Council underestimated us once. Let the universe never make the same mistake. The message, both in content and delivery, was definitive. Humanity had not only survived where empires had sought to suppress them, but they had proven their mastery of strategy, coordination, and tactical foresight. The warning was clear. The galaxy had learned, by catastrophe and calculation, that humans were no longer to be considered a minor or chaotic species. They were a force capable of shaping history, altering galactic power structures, and enforcing consequences with precision unmatched by any other civilization. Even in retreat, humanity left an enduring imprint. The shattered armada, the warning beacons, and the untouched colonies all served as reminders that humans acted not out of blind anger, but through carefully measured intelligence and intent. The galaxy had been forced to confront a truth it had long ignored. Humans were patient, adaptable, and deadly efficient when provoked. And in that efficiency lay the seed of every empire's greatest fear, the knowledge that one wrong move could lead to total annihilation. The galaxy would never forget the day humanity shattered the Council's armada. Across countless systems, from the outer rim to the heart of Council space, species whispered in disbelief and fear. Ships, that had once been considered invincible now floated as lifeless monuments to arrogance, their destruction a stark reminder that humans were not the chaotic, inconsequential species the Council had assumed. Humanity, for its part, did not celebrate in hubris. The fleet regrouped in hidden sectors, maintaining discipline and order as if the events that had just unfolded were merely another step in a centuries-long strategy. They had delivered a lesson, but they had also made a promise. Strength without purpose was meaningless, but precision, patience, and principle could reshape the universe itself. Council leaders, once proud and unshakable, faced an unprecedented crisis of credibility. Their authority had been shattered, their armada destroyed, and their arrogance exposed. Entire bureaucracies scrambled to understand what had happened, trying to identify failures in intelligence, strategy, and assumption. Across the galaxy, other species who had once dismissed humans began to reevaluate their perceptions. Where humans were once underestimated, they were now respected and feared. Humanity's message was simple, but absolute. Underestimate us, and you risk annihilation. Recognize our capacity, and survival remains possible. The galaxy began to take note that humans were not just survivors. They were masters of adaptability, strategy, and precision. Every species learned that our patience, curiosity, and ingenuity were not weaknesses, but strengths, honed over generations of hardship and challenge. As systems rebuilt and fleets recovered, the memory of the ambush remained etched in galactic history. The Council could no longer command obedience through reputation alone. Every species, every fleet, every leader now knew that one wrong move against humanity could lead to devastation. The human race, once underestimated and dismissed, had risen to a position of undeniable influence. In the silence, after the destruction, Admiral Celine Torin addressed her fleet one final time. Remember this day, and remember why it matters. We are humans. We endure, we adapt, and we act with precision. The galaxy has learned the consequences of underestimating us. Let this be the legacy of every strategy, every decision, and every star we touch. We are not to be ignored. We are not to be dismissed. We are humanity. The shattered Council fleets, the strategic withdrawal, and the beaconed warnings across the void ensured that humanity's return would never be underestimated again. One wrong move had shattered empires. One deliberate plan had reshaped the balance of power. The galaxy had learned the ultimate lesson. Humans are not just another species in the stars. They are a force, a reckoning, and a presence that will endure far longer than any arrogance could imagine. From that day forward, every corner of the galaxy would remember, underestimate humans, and the consequences are absolute. Humanity had returned, precise, powerful, and unyielding, a force whose patience and cunning had forever altered the course of history among the stars.